What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at all three new Team Rocket Leader Pokemon for the event that has now started in certain regions of the world, with Arlo now having Shadow Mawile, Sierra having Shadow Hoppip, and Cliff having Shadow Magikarp. This of course means that all three of these Pokemon will be available as Shiny Shadows with Magikarp and Hoppip for the very first time. Now all three of these Pokemon have had significant changes in how they play over the past couple of seasons, with Dragon Breath being reworked. Gyarados is actually now a very flexible Pokemon. Airlace, of course, getting nerfed, kind of saw Jumpluff fall off the face of a cliff in terms of his usage, and then of course Vise got a huge buff this season, but still nobody is running Mawile, so is it actually any good now, or was that move update kind of irrelevant? Well, I guess you'll find out during this video. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Which Shiny Shadow Pokemon did you grind hard for when it was in rotation, only to never end up catching it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. I should go into the very first battle I did with this team, and unfortunately met with one of the worst possible leads we could see. Bastiodon is certainly a core breaker to the team, of course. Smackdown going to hit both Gyarados and Jumpluff for super effective damage, and of course they will have Flamethrower for my Shadow Mawile as well. So at this point, kind of have to just stay in this matchup here. We can get off two Aqua Tails, get them very low, and the opponent, of course, going to commit to the farm down, but Smackdown doesn't exactly generate energy quickly, so hopefully I can shield once and commit to a full Astonish farm down. It's going to be super close, but unfortunately just barely not able to commit to that farm down. Forced to throw a Vice Grip here. Vice Grip does get the KO, of course. That is going to be double resisted, but from that range, it would easily take them out there. Now, their final Pokemon is going to be Azumarill, but I am running Solar Beam here. Solar Beam is unfortunately respected by the opponent. That is not ideal for me in the slightest. I'm going to shield up the Ice Beam. We can technically live an Ice Beam, but that will basically take us to like 1 or 2 HP. At this point, we full send again, and the opponent may be expecting an Acrobatics bait, or I don't know, whatever they thought my other charge move was, but they weren't expecting another Solar Beam, and at this point we do still have a lifeline. Of course, I don't have any shields in play, but I'm able to swap out. Is this a catch of the discharge? Yes, it is. That is going to waste some of their energy, and we're able to reach a Vice Grip already. Now, Vice Grip, it's non-stab, but it does decent damage, and that means I no longer need to full send a Solar Beam. At this point, of course, Mawile will be going down to the Mud Bomb, but we can now just settle for an Acrobatics. Acrobatics is resisted, but it's going to grab the final shield. They can reach another discharge, but it's only neutral damage. Even in a shadow form, Jumpluff is very bulky, and we're able to outpace, reaching a second Acrobatics. Acrobatics gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's top opponent into the next battle. We're going to see Talonflame in the lead, so this is a great lead matchup for the Gyarados. The opponent's going to safe swap into Credilli, so I'm going to bank a ton of energy before coming in with my Shadow Mawile. Now, Mawile, unless they're running Bulldoze, is going to completely wall their moveset here, although you can see two Rock Tombs are basically going to get the KO anyways. Grass Knot will be doing even more damage there, so I might as well just not mess around, go straight for Iron Head. They can come back in with the Talonflame, but we do have an energy advantage on the Gyarados. Our Switch Clocks will be slightly misaligned here, so we come in with the Gyarados, and their final Pokemon is a Blastoise. Now, of course, if they have Ice Beam, it's a little bit tricky for the Jumpluff, so we're going to go for a Crunch there, and then swap out and able to catch a resisted Hydro Cannon. Of course, Hydro Cannon would have been resisted into Gyarados as well, but we were fairly low, so likely would have grabbed the shield. But at this point, they farmed up to a potential Skull Bash. I might as well just shield this, commit to a full farm down here. The opponent is actually going to swap back into Talonflame, but I've got so much energy. We can go for Acrobatics. Acrobatics going to grab the first shield there. They kind of need to respect the damage from a second Acrobatics, so we're going to grab the final shield. Now we can come back in with the Gyarados, snipe with the Aqua Tail before they can throw any charge moves. Aqua Tail gets the KO there, 1 or 2 more Dragon Breaths, farms down the Blastoise, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's top opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see a Shadow Drifblim in the lead. So, this is a fairly neutral matchup here. Of course, you can see our fast move pressure is not quite as much as the opponent. They do swap out. They're trying to catch a charge move there. That's fine with me. We can come in with that Shadow Mawile. Chilling Water is going to debuff my attack stat. However, I can just barely reach an Iron Head before they reach the next charge move. The opponent not going to respect it. It gets the KO. They come back in with the Drifblim. Of course, my Astonish was super effective. However, we were debuffed by the Chilling Water. We're going to come back back in with the Gyarados, and I will throw straight away. Slightly risky there, just in case they do opt for the extra Astonish there, but they didn't. They threw on CMP, which we won. We can now shield up the Icy Wind, and they swap into a second Fairy type, and this time, unfortunately, it's a Fairy and Steel type Pokemon, meaning, unfortunately, Jumpluff is going to be completely walled. However, this is just going to be a Bulldoze. Bulldoze, double resisted. I do not need to respect that. I'm going to bank the Aqua Tail, save it for later, and then come in with my Shadow Jumpluff. Now, of course, I do not expect the opponent to shield anything from a Shadow Jumpluff, so I'm full sending the Solar Beam here. Solar Beam is going to be resisted, but Solar Beam does so much damage and actually puts them into Fairy Wind farm down range before they reach the next play rough, and so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see a Shadow Mightyena in the lead. So, we will outpace them by a single turn here. Or actually, no, by 3 turns here, as of course, they're going to have Poison Fang as their first charge move that they can reach. At this point, we are going to shield here just because I can grab both shields from the opponent. It is very likely that they have a very, alignment-based backline in the back here. Their plan is just going to be to double shield their Mightyena and then come in, and hopefully they can hard counter my backline even down a shield. But we're going to come in with the Shadow Mawile, and the opponent will fire a charge move. Now, everything is going to be resisted here. Poison Fang still does decent damage, and unfortunately, I can't quite fully farm them down there as I am running Astonish. Astonish is resisted, so I'm just going to bank that energy, come in with the Shadow Jumpluff, and let's see what they want to do. They're going to come in with a Wigglytuff, and this is going to be huge here because we can outpace them before they get to Icy Wind. Solar Beam is going to connect, but it barely doesn't get the KO. 1 HP and a dream. That is so unfortunate, especially since Wigglytuff has like 200 plus HP there, so that is agonizingly close, and unfortunately now they can reach a charge move as well. Shadow Ball doesn't get the KO, but we don't get to the Solar Beam either. And unfortunately, Mawile, we're never going to get the KO there with a Vice Grip or an Iron Head, so I don't choose to throw, and as a result, they farm me down. But GG's to that trainer. Into the next battle, going to see a Dragonair in the lead. So this is a fine matchup for me. The opponent just going to bait with an Aqua Tail, which is fine with me. That probably implies that they are running Wrap as the secondary charge move, or maybe even Dragon Pulse. Either way, we're going to come in with a Jumpluff, and we're met with a Shadow Steelix. But of course, I've got access to Solar Beam, so I will just be full sending it. And again, it's very unlikely that the opponent will be shielding in this matchup, at least not the first charge move anyways. So Solar Beam is going to connect. It does huge damage there. Unfortunately, not quite enough to put them into Fairy Wind farm down range. However, my switch clock is coming back up, so we swap into Shadow Mawile. We bank an Acrobatics as well, and the opponent's going to come in with an Azumarill. Of course, Mawile going to be fine here as long as they're not running Hydro Pump, although these bubbles will still add up over time to the point where I probably do need to start shielding. So I'm actually going to shield the first charge move here as the opponent does full send a Play Rough. That's fine with me. We can just settle for the Vice Grips at this point, so we are going to go for another Vice Grip here. We would need 2 charge moves to take out Azumarill anyways, so this is where Vice Grip is quite nice for us. Of course, previously we'd either have to run Play Rough or maybe even go for like Power Up Punch, which would be useful in certain situations, but certainly not up against Azumarill. Either way, whilst I'm talking about that, Mawile able to fully farm them down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see a Licky in the lead. Now here, I'm going to go for something very risky. I tried to throw on CMP with a Shadow Ball. I don't have a clue why I did that there, as the opponent does just opt for the extra fast move. So, eventually I do swap out. I catch a move onto my Jumpluff, as the opponent is just going to settle for a Body Slam. Then I'm going to come in with a Gourgeist. That's fine with me because we do have a significant energy advantage, and now I will be full sending Acrobatics. Acrobatics going to be shielded there. At this point, I could shield this, and if they do full send a Shadow Ball, we then go for 2 more Fairy Winds and then go for another Acrobatics, but actually I'm going to take the shield advantage. However, they're going to get it right back now anyways, and the opponent likely going to go for a combo play and swap back into the Licky. So maybe not the smartest play on my end there, but either way, we're going to shield the Body Slam. I'm going to fire off an Aqua Tail, and then I will look to try and catch another Body Slam onto my Shadow Mawile. Unfortunately, because we're on Astonish, I will not be able to commit to a full fast move farm down here, but because I swap out 1 turn early, we get the Astonish through, meaning we get to a Vice Grip on the CMP type with the next charge move. So Vice Grip, going to get the KO from that range, and let's see, they come back in with the Gourgeist, and can we get the KO? This is going to be double resisted here. Vice Grip barely doesn't get the KO, and the opponent snipes with a Primeape. We can come in with Gyarados, but it's actually a non-Shadow Primeape here, so Aqua Tail is going to do big damage, but it doesn't get the KO there, and unfortunately I will be going down to a Rage Fist, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's top on there into next battle. We see Gyarados into Thievul. So this was actually what I was actually thinking about when I was saying that we would outpace them by 1 turn. I was just getting the battles mixed up. But either way, they're going to be on Night Slash as the charge move. We fire off the Aqua Tail and then actually swap into my Jump Off here just because I don't really need to shield anything. They could full send a Play Rough here and the opponent is actually going to do that. But still, it doesn't deal too much damage there. And once again, I am full sending Solar Beam. Solar Beam is going to connect. Unfortunately, again, it doesn't quite get the one shot there. But that's okay with me, of course. The opponent is going to fire off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball gets the KO there. Not going to reveal my final Pokemon just yet, so I will come back in with my Shadow Gyarados and go for that Dragon Breath farm down. They come back in with Thievul just to be fully farmed down there, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Dusknoir. At this point, we can fire off the Crunch here, fishing for a debuff. We don't get the debuff, but it doesn't really matter. At this point, we don't need to throw any more charge moves. We can just commit to a full Astonish farm down with the Shadow Mawile, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see Sableye in the lead. So, once again, we are going to outpace them by a single turn here. So, I will just go straight for the Aqua Tail. And then, potentially, if they let this go through, I might just swap out into my Shadow Jump Off. And I do exactly that. Now, the opponent could have been on Power Gem there. But they actually bank all of that energy, a lot of energy as well, before coming in with a Bastiodon. Now, Solar Beam, unfortunately, does not do much damage in this matchup here. Even a second Solar Beam won't put them into farm down range. So at this point, the opponent is going to waste some energy there, firing off the Stone Edge. We're going to come in with the Shadow Mawile, and I could go for an Iron Head here, but I'm not sure that it will get the KO. I don't think it will, so I'm just going to shield here instead, and then look to overfarm massively in this matchup, but the opponent comes in with a Venusaur. Now, I'm going to go for a Vice Grip. Vice Grip is going to be no shielded. Again, another matchup where I kind of need to two charge moves to get the KO anyways. So now I'm actually going to swap into my Gyarados, fully sacrificing it, realizing Sableye does have a lot of energy, but Mawile will at least resist it, and hopefully we do still have some play. So they come back in with the Sableye. I'm going to shield the first charge move here. They will be able to reach back-to-back foul plays, and unfortunately this is a Shadow Mawile. So Shadow Mawile not going to tank that very comfortably. They swap back into Bastiodon. I'm trying to bait with a Vice Grip, but it doesn't really matter anyways. The opponent can safely shield that up there. Smackdown gets the resisted farm down, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's up on there into the next battle. Bit of a tricky lead matchup for us as we see a Galarian Weezing in the lead here. We have two Pokemon in the back that it's kind of difficult to swap into because Jump Off going to take super effective damage from the Sludge, and also they might run Overheat as well for the Mawile, but they go for a Brutal Swing. So I try to swap out there. I'm just slightly slow in my reactions, so end up having to use a shield here. The opponent's now going to swap into a shiny Shadow Sharpedo. You love to see it. We're going to come in with a Jump Off. I know this is going to be a super effective Poison Fang, and it does huge damage, but I can still go for the Fairy Wind farm down anyways. I come out with a Solar Beam, didn't really care what came in. I'm just gonna blind throw. Solar Beam resisted damage, but it gets the KO, and they've got a shiny Shadow Cacturne in the back as well. This would be pretty good for me if I was on Fairy Wind, as it would be super effective. However, Astonish is gonna be resisted here, so I'm gonna shield this. The opponent is gonna go for a Dynamic Punch, which is kind of surprising. Would have expected a Trailblaze there, but we swap back into Gyarados. Honestly, I couldn't remember how much energy we had here. We're able to catch the Dynamic Punch, go for the resisted Astonish farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I'm going to see Togekiss in the lead. So, once again, a bit of a tricky matchup for me because they do have a Fairy type in the lead. However, we can't safe swap into our Jump Off as they are also a Flying type. So, I'm going to go for Aqua Tail. Once again, we do outpace them by a single turn. That is the great thing about Gyarados with the updated Dragon Breath. We just get so fast to that Aqua Tail. We can go for another Aqua Tail here, and then I think eventually I will end up swapping into my Jump Off. Aqua Tail is going to grab a shield, and we swap out straight away. So, I'm able to catch a Side Shock here. Side Shock is still going to do decent damage here. Of course, Pecks are super effective, and they can still outpace me to the next charge attack. So this will get me very low. I'm hoping maybe I can Fairy Wind farm them down, but that is definitely not going to happen. So at this point, I am going to be forced to throw in Acrobatics. Acrobatics gets the KO there. We leave minimal farm for the final Pokemon on the opponent's end. And at this point, I am going to come in with my Shadow Gyarados. Realistically, I kind of just want to deal enough damage with the Dragon Breaths to put them into range where I can get the KO with an Iron Head. But we're going to swap into our Shadow Mawile. The opponent is going to stay in with the Furret, and of course, unless they're running Break, I should resist the charge boost here. They go for Trailblaze. They boost up their attack stat. I don't really know what they've got in the back, so I think I'm actually going to play it safe, use my shield here, but they've got a Galarian Stunfisk in the back. There's nothing Mawile can do there, so I do just concede the match. But GG's to opponent there into the next battle, Shadow and Polion in the lead. So a bit of a tricky matchup on both ends just because our fast moves are going to be resisted. I'm going to no-shield this. Drill Peck does a lot of damage, but we can just barely survive. We can fire off the Crunch. Crunch also going to do big damage, and we also drop their defense, meaning just a single Astonish gets the full fast move farm down there. Typically Empoleon paired with an Altaria in the back, so I am expecting Altaria as their third Pokemon here. They come in with a Florges. We're just going to no-shield this as they go for a Chilling Water. We can now look to massively over-farm, and Ironhead, even being debuffed, should get the KO, so the opponent is actually going to end up shielding. So this point, I'm going to shield as well. Match shields here. Going to go for another Ironhead. If they end up shielding this, I will just swap straight away into my Shadow Jumpluff. The opponent is going to shield, so we swap into Jumpluff. And it's actually not an Altaria in the back. Instead, it's going to be a Malamar. But either way, Fairy Wind is still going to hit for super effective damage. And actually, we've now got the opportunity to full send another Solar Beam. This time around, Solar Beam will be enough damage to get the one shot. They come back in with the Florges. And I am going to shield here. Of course, I don't know what the second move is. It's actually just a Trailblaze, which was a smart play on their end because they needed to boost up the Chilling Water damage, but in the end, it doesn't matter. We outpace them with the Acrobatics, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle, Shadow Sizzle in the lead. So this is another awkward matchup where both our fast moves are resisted. Once again, I do outpace by a single turn here, going straight for the Aquatail. Aquatail is going to be shielded. And now I think I'm going to match shields. The opponent going to go straight for a Night Slash here. Night Slash, no boost on their end, but they do make a really nice catch there, catching a resisted Aquatail onto Shadow Dragonair. Now here, I tried to bank an Aquatail before swapping out. I actually ended up swapping one turn early, so I don't quite have the energy. Whether or not that makes a difference in the end game, I guess we'll have to see. But we come in with Shadow Jumpluff. This time they are on wrap. They go for it the first time around. This is just going to be an Aquatail the second time, however, and now we can full send the Acrobatics. Acrobatics, not going to be shielded. It gets the KO. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Shadow Dragonite, but we're looking to be in a great position. We can come in with Shadow Mawile. The opponent recognizing there's not much they can do there. I think we would live a superpower, and so they do just allow a full Astonish farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle, Azumarill in the lead. Bit of a tricky matchup for me. I'm going to say swapping into Jumpluff, and unfortunately, I'm met with an Aegislash. So at this point, I'm just going to full send an Acrobatics here. I could go for Solar Beam, but it doesn't really help me that much, just because still really not going to do much damage at all. I'm trying to overfarm as much as possible. I recognize they're going to try and farm up to 100 energy before they throw their first Shadow Ball. And then, of course, if we throw a Charge Move, they can just swap back into the shield form. So I'm going to no-shield this. Shadow Ball does decent damage there, but we're still able to tank it relatively well. We can go for another Acrobatics, and they are actually forced to use a shield there because they were getting fairly low. At this point, I now see the opportunity to full send a Solar Beam. Solar Beam, unfortunately, doesn't quite get the KO there. I believe they have banked another 100 energy, so not ideal for me, but we can come in with the Shadow Mawile. I'm going to shield this just in case it was going to be a Hydro Pump. It is just a play rough there, but either way, we are going to go for back-to-back Vise Grips. First one is going to deal decent damage here, and again, another matchup where we need 2 charge moves to get the KO, so Vise Grip is very handy for me. I'm now going to look to overfarm. Don't really overfarm too much just because I want enough HP where they can't come back in with the Aegislash, but unfortunately their final Pokemon is going to be a Wigglytuff. So this is a very tricky matchup for me. I don't think even if they just stay in with the Wigglytuff, if I can reach 3 Aquatails before they fully charm farm me down, but they are going to throw a charge move, meaning they very likely swap back into the Aegislash, so I'm able to swap out, make the catch onto my Jumpluff, but it just depends. Were they at 100 energy? Of course, Shadow Ball going to be taking me out, and they did have back-to-back charge moves, so very well played by the opponent there. Bit of a nasty team with Azumarill, Wigglytuff, and Aegislash, but either way, GG's to that trainer. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Malamar in the lead. So this is a fine matchup. Once again, we will outpace them to the first charge move. So I'm going to go straight for an Alcatel, and then I will actually swap straight away into my Shadow Jumpluff. Jumpluff, of course, hitting for super effective Fairy Wind damage. It is non-stab, so it doesn't really add up that much, but we're going to no-shield. They fire off the foul play. The opponent's now going to swap into Corviknight, which of course is going to completely wall my energy. However, I am triple resisting the stand attack damage, so Air Cutter also not really going to deal that much damage here, so I'm actually actually not in that bad of a situation, especially since my switch clock is now going to come up. Now, they've got the energy for a payback, so I will respect this, and the opponent does full send it. I'm now going to look to overfarm, but the opponent makes a brilliant catch there, catching a resisted Aquatel onto their Blastoise. However, we can still outpace them to a Crunch, and Crunch, whilst it is going to hit for neutral damage, is going to deal decent damage there, and it will force them to use some of their energy. They're one away from back-to-back charge moves, however, Mawile can come in and get the Astonished farm down, and we're actually looking to be in a pretty good position here. We can, of course, resist all the charge moves from this Corviknight. Of course, these sand attacks, now that they're boosted, are going to add up over time, but they swap, they try to make the combo play there, but we can now just shield this up. They do bait with a foul play, don't really care, because now we can farm up to back-to-back Vise scripts. First one should be grabbing the final shield from the opponent. The second Vise script will be more than enough damage to take out Malamar from this range, and then, of course, Corviknight does have the energy for another air cutter, but it doesn't really matter. Remember, we have a solar beam on our jump bluff just in case we need it, but it turns out we can just go for an Astonished farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.